once again joined by Michael Grimm, who's challenging Dan Donovan for the 11th Congressional District seat in a Republican primary next month. It's a party race. It's all about the Republicans who come out. It's only for Republicans. The elected Republican leadership on Staten Island, the people you used to serve with, have almost uniformly lined up with your opponent. Why is that?
Well, it's expected. He's the incumbent. I think that's kind of an unwritten rule that you stand by your incumbents, and it's something I agree with. I harbor no ill will towards them. I think that once the primary is over, very confident we're well ahead in the race right now. We'll maintain that lead, and I think they'll all come on board after the primary, so it won't be a problem. We
talked a minute ago about Republican seats maybe flipping here and there around the country. Do you have any concerns about this seat in particular? And I raised that because the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, released a poll saying, hey, Michael Grimm is in the lead. Now, I don't know if they did that because they like you. It sounds to me like they did that because they want to take you on.
I'm not sure necessarily about that. Look, what people know for sure, again, love me or hate me, I am a very good campaigner. I work very hard. My opponent, Mr. Donovan does not. He never has. He's not a retail campaigner. He won't go out there and knock on doors. He won't show up at every event. I will. So I'm not sure that they would want to take on the guy that's as tenacious as I am. You look at the amount of signs and the enthusiasm around my race. That's also a big difference. That's why we feel so confident with the primary. As you just mentioned, this is going to be a small turnout. So it's just Republicans, but the enthusiastic Republicans will come out, in my opinion. And that's surely on my side. They'll come out in November as well. So I think that we have the advantage there also.
And so when we see your opponent, Dan Donovan, at the side of the president, just last week, as a matter of fact, out on Long Island, and we see him with, Rudy Giuliani, who I know is also still popular on Staten Island, how do you counter that?
You don't. We run, again, we run on the facts of the race. This is, Dan Donovan now, because he's in a primary, has changed his position on almost everything. You even mentioned on one of your shows, he never mentioned border walls or deporting people. In fact, he said on national television he doesn't believe in deporting people. Now, because he's in a primary, he's the complete opposite. And I think that backfires because people are not stupid. Especially here in Staten Island and Brooklyn. They're very savvy people, and they do follow that. So they know that he's flip-flopped on all his positions. They know he voted against the president when it mattered most, and I've mentioned those 3 votes already. So if he's been voting against the president, and he's been for amnesty for the most part, he co-sponsored 2 amnesty bills, now he's suddenly saying, we're going to deport them, we're going to be defend against sanctuary cities, we'll punish the sanctuary city. I think people see that for what it is. It's just not sincere.
Can you win with the position, though, that you have staked out? I'm thinking, look, if you get what you want, if in a couple of weeks you get the Republican nominee, in this district in November, there's going to be a lot of Democrats in there. On the Brooklyn side, it's a very diverse district. There are a lot of immigrants in the district. There are different opinions about it. No question. That where you're coming from now, it's going to really kind of alienate them and help your likely Democratic opponent.
Well,
right?
Will it help his base? Sure. There's no doubt about that. But I'm not expecting to get the liberal base to ever vote for me. So I understand that going in. But what I think is you do have a lot of, I would say the union workers, the wrench turners, the cops, the firemen, they're all union. A lot of them are registered Democrats, but they are conservative. They do want our borders closed. They are concerned about gangs like MS-13 coming in and so on. They are concerned about the drugs that cross the border and the human trafficking that crosses the border. It's not just an immigration issue. So I think that those, again, it's one of the reasons why Donald Trump did so well in this district. You can't ignore those numbers. He ran on building a wall. I believe we should build that wall. And I don't think that hurts me in the general election. I think that all of those Democrats that are more centrist, that are somewhat conservative, will continue to vote for me as they have in the past.
Let's talk about an issue that I know is of great local concern, which is opioid abuse and ways to fight it. Now, you're a former lawman. Your opponent is a former prosecutor. Are there solutions other than law enforcement that you think need to be tried in a meaningful way?
Yes. First of all, I've said this from the beginning. This is such a complex issue, and it's destroying families. Your heart has to break for how many people have lost someone. You cannot walk out your door and not see someone that's been affected by this epidemic. It's going to take a complex solution. I would like to propose to the administration to work with the HHS secretary. Let's start a pilot program in Staten Island because it's under 500,000 people, so it's a manageable size. And let's work with the state and the city, but let's also bring in the private sector. Why? Because I would like to model part of it after MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It was a very successful campaign. It was mostly an advertising campaign. And that's where the private sector, Google, Facebook, they can help bring national awareness to an issue that is affecting everyone, as I said. On the other side, we have to increase access to rehabilitation, but also after rehabilitation. Where do you go? You've alienated yourself from your family, your friends, you've been stealing, you've been this, that, you relapsed several times, nobody wants you back in their home. You need a place to go. So there's many different issues to this. The federal government should be funding at the top. They should be the spearhead, but with the state and the city, and then bring in the private sector. I don't have a silver bullet here, but I know that we can come up with a comprehensive plan to do that.
That sounds very interesting. I don't know if I would call it conservative as a strategy.
I don't think it is. I think this is apolitical. I really do. I don't think this certainly, I'll tell you one thing, the opioid and heroin doesn't say to you, are you a Republican or Democrat, before it takes your child or your neighbor or your friend or your cousin. So I really see this as an opportunity to work across the party lines and across the federal, state, and city lines and bring everyone together and say, look, federal government can take a lead role, but it's not mandating. The city and state can play intricate roles, but also that private sector can play, I think, a major role in building the awareness and building that campaign. Again, like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers was very, very effective. Everyone remembers that acronym to this day.
Yes.
That's what we need for the opioid crisis.
Okay. Now, on a related note, it's mostly state, but there's clearly a federal role when it comes to marijuana legalization. As we've been reporting, we're on the verge of seeing it happen here. We're going to have a report in just a couple of minutes, as a matter of fact. What's your sense of that? And as a member of Congress, where would you go?
I'm disappointed. I think it's a mistake. We have kids and family members dying every day from an opioid crisis. And now we're going to legalize marijuana, which I believe is a gateway drug. And I do believe it does have addictive qualities, maybe nowhere nearly as bad as opioids. But what kind of message are we sending? On one channel, we're going to say, stay away from drugs, stay away from opioids and heroin and all of this. But marijuana is okay. I just think it's a mixed message for children, and I do believe it's a gateway and does have some addictive qualities. And people will say, well, people get drunk and drive. Well, that's why Mothers Against Drunk Driving was so successful in getting the laws strict. I don't want anyone being high on marijuana driving either. I don't see it as a smart move, and I do think it sets us back, especially with the opioid epidemic.
Let me ask you about the state Republican convention, and this is true for the Democrats too. Members of Congress, by and large, were not present in the statewide conventions. Different timetable, different race. Yours is a little bit sooner and so forth. On the other hand, again, if you're the nominee, you've got you'll have a running mate. Do you know Mark Molinaro? Is that somebody?
I don't know Mark. I have heard some good things about Mark, but I really don't know him at all. I've never met Mark, as far as I know. Maybe I did passing at a, the problem is you go to these big events and you meet someone for 2 seconds and you don't even remember that you did. So
sure.
I'm embarrassed if I did meet him. I apologize, but I don't remember him.
Well, what do you think about? I mean, you've embraced Donald Trump. You've kind of really sort of said, what you're going to do is help vote his program into existence and try and stick by him and so forth. The state party, including Mr. Molinaro, they're going in kind of the opposite direction. They didn't even want him at the convention, as a matter of fact. Are they making a mistake?
I think so. I think it's a huge mistake. Again, if you just look at the fact that he won an election based on his platform, and I haven't seen our president deviate from that platform. He said he was going to deal with trade issues. He is. He said he was going to pass tax reform. He has. All the things he said he was going to build a wall, and he's trying like heck to build it. So I think that all the things he said he was going to do, he is doing. That should be a breath of fresh air, and I think it's a big mistake for the state GOP not to embrace our president. And more importantly, he's our commander-in-chief, and he is a Republican. I don't know where the disloyalty comes from, but I find it offensive.
Well, I mean, in certain cases, I mean, Rob Astorino, who was the candidate 4 years ago for governor, got wiped out, lost his position. He attributes it. He's told me more than once. He attributes it to him being associated with Donald Trump in a district where a lot of independents and Democrats are very upset with the president, and that it has, basically swept him out of office.
I don't have an answer for, what happened to Rob Astorino. I would say this, though. We have a Republican team. We run as a team, and I think you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if we start breaking ranks, that's exactly what the Democrats want.
I mean, but what about there was a lot over the weekend about a controversial position of separating families from their children, separating children from their parents if they arrive at the border and they're undocumented, whether or not they've applied for refugee status, whether or not they've got a valid claim that could, in fact, let them stay here for a while, to simply separate them. That's a tough line.